Comics are having a tough time these days. While manga is doing just fine and dandy, stores and publishers are closing down by the week. The thing is, if you're a horror fan, there's no better time for horror in comics than now. So why not go out and support your local comic store and publishers by picking up a few horror comics? Here's what's new in comic book horror this week, January 25th, 2023. Welcome back to ML Miller Frights. I'm ML Miller. Before we begin, please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications. Let's check out this week in comic book horror, January 25th, 2023. Zombicide, Day 1, Number 1 is from SourcePoint Press. The story is by Stefano Vietti and Luca Enoch, with art by Marco Itri and Alessio Moroni. I'm always a bit iffy about zombie stories, be they comics or movies. We all survived the media's zombie plague through the aughts, and it most likely will be a while before I sign my investment into a new zombie story. Still, this series focuses on a guy who prepped for the zombie apocalypse, but his bunker, with all of the survival fixins, is on the other side of town, and the town is full of zombies. Sounds like a sticky wicket, and not a bad setup to base a zombie story on. Playthings, number 4 is from Scout Comics. The story is by John Clark, with art by Travis Williamson. This series features a twisted take on Toy Story, where abandoned and misused toys strike back against their owners. One kid finds herself caught in a world where the toys are alive and kicking and stabbing and eating and killing. Good stuff. A Legacy of Violence, number 4, is from Mad Cave Studios. The story is by Cullen, with art by Andrea Mutti. With Maniac of New York and this series, as well as the occasional other horror miniseries, Andrea Mutti has become one of my favorite horror artists. This is a slasher yarn about a survivor who can't seem to shake a stalker who is on her tail. This issue is the end of the first arc of this 12-issue maxi-series. Lovecraft, Unknown KADATH, number 5, is from Ablaze Comics. The story is by Florentino Florez, with art by Guillermo, Sanna, and Jaques Salomon. This is an imaginative adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's The Dream, Quest of Unknown KADATH. Our weary traveler finally finds a safe place in the treacherous dream landscape and is forced to choose whether to stay or continue on his journey. Plus, this issue has more of the original prose story in the back matter. Vampirella Strikes number 9 is from Dynamite Entertainment. The story is by Tom Sniegoski, with art by Jonathan Lau. In a world where the natural and supernatural have collided, only one vampire alien can stand up to the forces of evil, and she's wearing a thong. Besides the cheesecakey covers, there's quite a compelling story going on here, and look at that. It's got a cover that doesn't prominently feature those
ass, titties, ass, and titties.
How's about that? Lovesick number 4 is from Image Comics. The story and art are by Luana Vecchio. So I've finally found out the difference between this comic and Red Room. While Red Room built a vast world of depraved internet red rooms and torture sites for cash, Lovesick focuses on a single story of one woman who finds herself trapped in an online red room. Having escaped from the room, the lead finds herself teaming up with a cannibal in order to survive. Sounds like my kind of cool. Year Zero, Volume 0, number 4 is from AWA Upshot. The story is by Benjamin Percy and Daniel Kraus, with art by Goran Sudzuka. Daniel Kraus was the guy who Romero passed the torch to so his Living Dead series could live on. This series depicts the first days of the Living Dead apocalypse from across the globe. So if you're looking for that next evolution of Romero's Dead series, this is it. Nightwalkers number 1 is from SourcePoint Press. The story is by Bunn, with art by Colin Johnson. A rehab center secluded in the middle of a mountain range is the setting for a bunch of kids trying to survive the night against a bloodthirsty monster. This is Horrormeister Colin Bunn's newest and goriest horror series, and by the looks of that cover, it looks to be pretty awesome. I can't wait for this one. Cool cover. Philadelphia, number 27, is from Image Comics. The story is by Rodney Ramos, with art by German Erasmusby and Jason Sean Alexander. Expect more revisionist history with an undead George Washington and his vampire army taking on an army of Haitian zombies. This one is written, as usual, by series creator Rodney Barnes and is joined by Red Hot Spawn artist Jason Sean Alexander. The Sandman Universe presents The Dead Boy Detectives number 2 is from DC Comics. The story is by Pornsak Pichetshote, with art by Steve Stokely. The Dead Boy Detectives are in danger of dying all over again when they try to help a couple of Thai ghosts solve a mystery. I've never really been into the Dead Boys, or the rest of the Sandman universe for that matter. Anyone who is enjoying this series, let me know what you think of it down in the comments. Gargoyles number 2 is from Dynamite Entertainment. The story is by Greg Weisman, with art by George Cambadeas. Gargoyles dropped when I felt like I was too cool to watch cartoons back in the day. Ah, those angsty teenage years. How I never really want to think back on them. So I never really got into the original series. I might rectify that someday, as Gargoyles has quite a following. This series continues right where the cartoon left off, so it's bound to please those Gargoyles fans. Lady Death, Necrotic Genesis number 1 is from Coffin Comics. The story is by Brian Pulido and Mike McLean, with art by Diego Bernard. Pulido's World War Death crossover keeps chugging along with this issue, which is creatures popping up all over the world made of Lady Death's DNA. Does that mean that across the world people are popping up and stretching out their t-shirts with some... You've got to read it to find out. The Vineyard number 3 is from Aftershock Comics. The story is by Brian Hawkins, with art by Sammy Kivella. I'm excited to read this long-delayed third issue of this folk horror-esque series about the owner of an orchard who has made sacrifices to the god Dionysus for ages and suddenly decides to cut him off. This one has some creepy art by Sammy Kivella. I'm glad this series is continuing. Creepshow number 5 is from Skybound Entertainment. The story is by Clay McLeod Chapman and Steve Orlando, with art by Mariana Ignazi and Anduita Citria. This issue features 2 stories from The Creeper, one of which is by Marvel writer and my pal Steve Orlando, about a guy who will do anything to stay young. I'm still enjoying this very cool series that feels very faithful to the tone of the original movies. DC Horror presents Sergeant Rock vs. the Army of the Dead, number 5, from DC Comics. The story is by Bruce Campbell, with art by Eduardo Riso. Sergeant Rock and Easy Company have taken on all sorts of evil, human and otherwise, but how will they fare against the chemically evolved and raving mad Adolf Hitler? All of this brought to you by the man himself, Bruce Campbell, who turns out is quite a solid comic book writer. Who knew? Midnight Suns number 5 is from Marvel Comics. The story is by Ethan Sachs, with art by Alberto Foch and Luigi Zagaria. Okay, look at that cover. Does that cover look like a horror comic book to you? Nope, it doesn't for me either. I kind of quit this series after the second issue, as nary a scare could be found between the covers in this supposed horror series. I wish Marvel could put out some more real horror and not this slightly dark superhero stuff. Embrace the horror, Marvel. You've got all kinds of horror characters to play with. Make some real horror comics. On a totally unrelated note, I write comics, and I kind of dig horror. Just saying. Boogeyman number 5 is from Ablaze Comics. The story is by Matthew Salvia, with art by Jet. I'm loving this series about childhood boogeymen, women, and monsters who turn out to be real, and one lone boogeyman who has become attached to his kid and is attempting to protect him from the rest of the monsters. It's a fun concept, a little like Happy meets Monsters, Inc., but still it's been a raucous adventure with monstrous characters, and to top it all off, it's got an artist named Jet, and I love saying Jet. Plush number 3 is from Image Comics. The story is by Doug Wagner, with art by Daniel Hilliard. Right now, this is my favorite horror comic on the shelves. It's about a guy who is only into furries because his girlfriend is. He agrees to go to a furry convention and stumbles into a dark hallway where the furries are devouring humans. Now he's dressed as a furry and on the run from the ravenous furries who take their costumes a little too seriously, and a police force set on bringing in all the furries. So much depraved fun in this comic, I highly recommend it. Well, that's it for this week's haul. I'll be picking up a few of these this week, including Plush, Boogeyman, Sergeant Rock and the Army of the Dead, Creepshow, and Nightwalkers. How about you? Let me know which horror comics you're going to be picking up this week down in the comments.
You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your reality.